between plants and animals, right? It's one of the first things we learn in biology class. One stands still, soaking up the sun, and the other runs around looking for dinner. Simple. But what if I told you that deep down at the cellular level, plants and animals are hiding this incredible secret about just how similar they really are?
So it all starts right here, with this fundamental split in how to live. You've got plants, they're stationary, literally rooted to the spot. They're what we call autotrophs, which is just a fancy way of saying they make their own food. And then you have animals. They're mobile, they're dynamic, they're heterotrophs, meaning they have to go out and hunt and eat to get their energy. These two completely opposite strategies, well, they set the stage for pretty much everything else.
And it makes sense, right? These totally different lifestyles mean you need totally different body plans. It's a classic case of form following function. A life spent just standing there requires a very different kind of architecture than a life spent on the move. And this design philosophy, it goes all the way down to their most basic building blocks, their tissues. And you can see that difference so clearly when you look at their tissues. Plant tissues are all about support, so they have these really rigid walls. And get this, a huge portion of that supportive tissue is actually made of dead cells. It's a super efficient design. Animals, though, they need to be flexible to move, so their tissues are made of living cells with these pliable membranes. Of course, that takes a lot more energy to maintain, but it's a must-have for an active life.
Yeah, let's talk about that energy angle for a second. Plants are just masters of conservation. I mean, not moving around saves a ton of energy, but so does their actual structure. Think about it. If big parts of your body, like the wood in a tree, are made of dead cells, there's zero metabolic cost to keep them going. It's kind of like building a skyscraper with a steel frame. The frame itself doesn't need to eat.
So we've got these vastly different tissues, built for completely different jobs. The logical assumption then is that the individual cells themselves must be worlds apart, wouldn't you think? You'd expect the fundamental building blocks to be, well, fundamentally different. And, on the surface, they absolutely look that way.
And the most obvious difference, the one everybody points to, is that plant cell wall. It's this rigid pectocellulosic box that wraps around the entire cell, giving it this incredible structural strength. And to give you some perspective here, the tiny cellulose microfibrils that make up this wall have a stiffness that's comparable to steel, no joke. It's basically a cellular fortress, perfectly designed for a life of standing tall against gravity.
Okay, but this is where our story takes a really sharp turn. Because a group of scientists decided to actually challenge this core assumption. They came up with this clever experiment to look past the obvious, to measure what was really happening on the inside. And what they found connects these two kingdoms in a way that, honestly, nobody really expected.
They asked a really simple but kind of profound question. We all agree the cell wall is what makes a plant cell so rigid. But what if you just take it away? What's the actual cell like underneath all that armor? Is it still totally different from an animal cell, or is that wall just hiding a big secret?
So, how'd they do it? It was pretty ingenious. They used enzymes to carefully dissolve that cell wall, basically freeing the living cell inside. This little naked plant cell is called a protoplast. And then, using these incredibly sensitive instruments, they did something really simple. They poked it. They measured its internal stiffness to see how it would compare one-on-one with an animal cell. And the results were, wow, just stunning. A normal plant cell with its wall is off the charts rigid. We're talking 1,000 times stiffer than the others. But the second you remove that wall, the plant protoplast becomes incredibly soft. And here's the kicker. Its rigidity is almost identical to the animal cells. That fortress wall was hiding a soft interior that was, mechanically speaking, just like its animal cousin.
To put a number on it, the effective rigidity for both the wall-less plant cell and the animal cell was right around 1100 pascals. I mean, think about that. After billions of years of evolving on completely separate paths, the basic mechanical core of their cells turned out to be the same. This wasn't just a coincidence. It hinted that there might be some kind of biophysical sweet spot that life needs to hit, which of course just raises an even bigger question. How is that even possible?
So now we've got a real puzzle on our hands. If a plant cell without its wall and an animal cell feel the same, they have the same mechanical properties, how on earth are they doing it? They're made of different stuff. This clue led the researchers to look at the internal machinery, the stuff responsible for a cell's shape and its integrity. And the answer, it turns out, was in the cytoskeleton, which is basically the cell's internal scaffolding. You can think of it like the network of beams and girders that gives a cell its structure.
Now, both plant and animal cells have a cytoskeleton, but, and this is the key, they've built their internal frameworks using different primary materials to get to the exact same result.
For animal cells, their main tool is something called actin. It's this dense mesh of actin filaments that crisscrosses right under the cell membrane. It works together with little motor proteins, and that's what gives an animal cell its shape, its ability to move, and its overall mechanical feel. It's a very dynamic, active network. But the plant protoplast? It uses a completely different tool. Its strength comes mainly from a dense network of things called microtubules. Now, these are individually way more rigid than actin filaments. So by building its internal scaffold with these stiffer beams, the plant cell achieves the exact same overall mechanical behavior as an animal cell does with its more flexible network. It's two different architectural solutions to the very same engineering problem.
So what does this all mean when you put it together? This incredible finding that two super distantly related forms of life arrived at the same answer for a fundamental physics problem using completely different toolkits, well, it points to a really beautiful and powerful concept in biology.
It's a textbook example of what's called evolutionary convergence. This is what happens when totally unrelated organisms independently evolve similar traits because they're facing similar challenges. You see it on the big scale all the time, right? Like the wings of a bat and the wings of a bird. But this experiment showed it happening at the deepest, most fundamental molecular level. And the researchers themselves, they just summed it up perfectly in their paper. They wrote that plant and animal cells evolved different molecular strategies to reach a comparable cytoplasmic mechanical core. It's just this powerful statement about how there seem to be optimal solutions to physical problems in biology, and evolution, if you give it enough time, will find a way to get there, one way or another.
So it just leaves you wondering, right? If this huge, vast divide we see between plants and animals can basically disappear at the cellular level, revealing a common answer reached by two different paths, what other hidden rules and universal principles is life following, just waiting for us to look past the surface and find them?